coming to you from the sensible city of board gaming, Omaha, Nebraska. Welcome to the Out of the Desk podcast. I'm your host, Logical Bryce. Tied in with the popular recurring Out of the Desk Geek list on Board Game Geek, the Out of the Desk podcast is a bi-weekly podcast that is focused on re-exploring games we play that we hadn't previously played in a year or more. Why did the game get dusty? Why did you decide to dust it off? How does the game compare to how you remembered it? Are you likely to play it more often in the future? These are the questions that we're interested in examining on Out of the Dust. This week on the podcast, episode 72. On the Out of the Dust segment, I'll bring chaos in the old world out of the dust and a contributor dust off Sentinels of the Multiverse. On the reaction segment, I continue my multi-part series on the current state of affairs, the controversial publisher Tasty Minstrel Games. On the What I've Been Playing segment, I review Cross Clues. On the Obscure Bryce Game segment, I review the Sonic X trading card game. And we wrap up the episode by continuing my review of the BGG and my own top 5 countdown of 2010 with the number 3s on the list. I had a chance to bring Chaos in the Old World, Eric Lang's 2009 Warhammer-themed area control game from publisher Fantasy Flight, out of the dust recently. I last played it 5 years and 20 days ago. This is one that tends to get dusty for me, and I have to schedule a special event to get it to the table again. This time it was one of the first games we played with some friends at a weekend-long gaming getaway. For some reason, I get it in my head that this is a more complicated game than it actually is, and that contributes to the periodic dustiness. But then, when I finally do play it again, I remember it's really pretty straightforward, and wonder why I don't play it more often. Of course, it is best with a high player count, so that's probably part of it. But this particular play was really good. I started strong as corn, while my wife charged ahead with the horned rat in the middle of the game before running out of steam. Meanwhile, Nurgle and Slaanesh kept up a steady pace and triggered end-of-game victories on the same round, which ultimately went to Slaanesh with a priority dial check ahead of Nurgle's 50 victory points. Ooh, such a satisfying play. Definitely makes me want to get it to the table again soon, while it's still fresh in my mind, and before I forget that it's really not all that hard to get to the table when I put my mind to it. Let's see what a contributor brought out of the dust. Adam, username Spirit of 70, brought Sentinels of the Multiverse, greater than games modern classic 2011 superhero-themed game from designers Christopher Badell, Paul Bender, and Adam Rebatero out of the dust. Adam last played it 1 year and 3 months ago. He writes, I play the electronic version of this all the time, mainly the weekly challenge games, but this was my first play of my physical copy in some time. I played Legacy, Raw, and Wraith versus base game Omnitron in Megaopolis. What should have been a pretty straightforward game quickly went south thanks to sedative fletchets, followed by technological singularity, followed by a traffic pile-up not long after the game had started. Still, even with the loss, it was nice to have it on the table again. Thanks for the contribution, Adam. Sentinels is a game I used to own but traded away after discovering it wasn't a good fit for me solo play, but I'm glad to hear that it works for you solo play. Reaction segment time! This week on the podcast, I'm continuing my multi-part investigation to the once-respected publisher Tasty Minstrel Games. Last episode, I reviewed their historical significance to board gaming and overviewed their current unfulfilled Kickstarter projects. Belfort has officially hit the 1-year late milestone. Luna is almost there. Yokohama Duel and Dragon's Interest are already late. And according to production updates, Emperor's Choice is not even close to meeting its shipping estimate. I suspect that the company has bitten off more than they can chew by having 5 outstanding projects going on at the same time, since the company has admitted that delays in the first 2 campaigns have resulted in delays in the last 3. Throughout updates of the various campaigns, TMG has blamed these delays on change in staff, COVID-19, and change in shipping partners. In my opinion, the first excuse is flimsy and a big red flag for the future success of a company. The second excuse is understandable, except that Belfort and Luna should have been fulfilled before that became an issue, and Yokohama Duel and Dragon's Interest have questionable timelines where that is concerned as well. The latter excuse deserves more explanation. Originally, TMG had partnered with Amazon to fulfill Belfort and Luna, since their prices were cheapest. When Amazon stopped working with third-party shippers due to COVID-19 earlier in the year to focus on delivery of essential items, TMG reached out to Quartermaster Logistics to replace Amazon, agreed on a deal, and was put in QML's queue. Before QML got to TMG's project, Amazon began working with third-party shippers again, and TMG made the decision, in the interest of cost, to cancel their deal with QML and go back to Amazon. Furthermore, though there was not an official update about this, Seth mentioned it in a campaign comment that TMG was having a problem with the ISBN numbers of Luna, and presumably Belfort, which was causing further delays in shipping with Amazon. Seth reached out to backers in the Luna and Belfort campaigns via comments to solicit the expertise of anyone who had experience with ISBN numbers. The most recent Belfort to Luna update said that TMG had abandoned Amazon again and was supposedly back in QML's shipping queue. A recent tweet response releasing a list of their upcoming projects through the middle of August did not have any Tasty Minstrel games on the list, though, despite Tasty Minstrel's claim that QML would start shipping Belfort and Luna early in the month. Thanks to his last update where he mentioned he is no longer handling the communication for the Belfort to Luna campaigns, Seth's current status for the company has become an issue as well. Has he been fired? Reassigned to a different position? Voluntarily stepped down? Who knows? He's not saying! Now, Seth has a long history of poor communication on TMG campaigns since Gentis, but at least his updates were some kind of communication, sporadic, vague, and littered with excuses and questionable information as they were. Daniel, the president, and his partner Michael Mendes, who sets up the campaigns, don't have a history of communication at all, so backers are understandably concerned if they are going to continue hearing anything about any of these campaigns in the future. So, once again, we see here, as in so many other controversial and fraudulent Kickstarters, an issue of honest, timely, and straightforward communication. Many backers in the comment sections of the Kickstarter pages seem willing to give Seth a pass on his role in the controversy because they believe responsibility ultimately lies with Daniel and Michael. I agree with the responsibility part, but Seth has enough problematic history himself that I'm okay throwing him under the bus too, with the possibility for redemption, however, if he later comes out with an explanation on what his role in the company has been, is, and will be in regards to these campaigns, and comes clean in everything he knows concerning them and the company. But his track record of a poor communicator doesn't have me holding my breath about this at all. That summary of the issues nicely wraps up the record of Tasty Minstrel's controversy for this episode. Next episode, I'll go over some speculation of the company's future and arrive at a conclusion of what I'm going to do in the future concerning the company and the game I'm waiting for. This week on the What I've Been Playing segment, I'm going to tell you about Cross Clues, a new word association party game from publisher Blue Orange and designer Gregory Gerard. Gregory has a couple of designs to his credit in the BGG database with just a handful of owners, which makes Cross Clues his first major publication. It's not a game that was on my radar at all, though, and I honestly hadn't heard of it until I happened to win a copy in a random drawing at the BGG Dice Tower Virtual Con last month. Naturally, I looked up the game that I happened to win to find out more about it. Usually in situations like these, I'll just flip the game I won into trade for something on my wish list. But after reading through the description of the game, I was intrigued and decided to give it a spin when it arrived in the mail. That happened just the other day, and since the rules weren't very long, I was able to get it to the table right away with my wife and try it out. But was it worth my time? Well, here's how it works. 8 words are arranged so that 4 of them form column headers and 4 of them form row labels, leaving a blank grid of 16 coordinates between them. Players then take turns drawing a coordinate token from a stack, which will correspond to the intersection between 2 of the words. The player must think of a single word clue that associates these 2 words, and make the other players guess the correct coordinate. The other players will discuss amongst themselves which coordinate they think is correct for the word association clue, and then point to the empty spot on the grid. If they are correct, the clue giver places the coordinate token on that spot, and it's worth a point at the end of the game. If they are incorrect, the token is discarded face down instead for a penalty point. After all 16 coordinate tokens are drawn and guessed, the game ends, and if the players cooperatively get more right than wrong, then they win. Getting a greater percentage right results in better and more prestigious levels of victory. Getting more wrong than right results in defeat. This game worked really well at 2 players because we were both operating with knowledge we couldn't share about what tokens were face down if we missed one, I'm not sure how well that element would work in a multiplayer game because, since the clue giver status passes from player to player, there's nothing that would prevent someone from going, "Oh, I definitely don't think we should select that coordinate for this clue," because they know that particular spot is a face-down token that was missed on their clue giver turn. That's something that might have to be house-ruled amongst some groups to accommodate. Now, it's possible that my wife and I were just on the same wavelength when we've played, but we did find the victory conditions very easy to meet. We missed 3 on one game and only 1 on another. Because the quantity of possible correct answers decreases over the course of a game, guesses become more and more likely to be right over time, assuming at least some are being guessed correctly. With that in mind, many groups may find it desirable to set their own victory parameters, maybe even going so far as only considering a perfect victory a true win. But in the grand scheme of things, these two elements are only minor complaints because, more importantly, this game is just plain fun! This game did a great job of creating memorable moments in the gameplay that rewarded players with joviality due both to successful guesses and dramatically wrong ones. I also appreciate how the clue giver status passes around the table so everyone gets a turn. In games like this, I tolerate plays that require me to be the guesser, just so I will eventually have a play where I'm the clue giver, which tends to be more appealing for me. But I get to satisfy that itch multiple times in a single play with cross clues. The game has a low price point and is widely accessible to a large range of potential audiences, so if it sounds even remotely interesting, I think it's going to work well for a large number of groups, as long as they treat it with the same seriousness as one might a game like, say, Concept. I'm glad I won this copy because Cross Clues turns out to be a keeper for me. I'm going to put it in all of my game group travel bags for the foreseeable future. Obscure Bryce Game segment time. This week on the segment, I'm going to tell you about Sonic X Trading Card Game, which came out way back in 2005 from publisher Score and designer David Eckhart, who also did the Buffy, Yu Yu Hakusho, and Dragon Ball GT trading card games for Score. I played a lot of trading card games back in the day, but Sonic X was not one of them. My oldest son has become a big Sonic fan, so I thought it'd be fun to track down a starter of this on eBay for his birthday. The rules are just a single sheet, unusual for a trading card game, and it was easy to get it to the table right away as part of his birthday game lineup. Here's how it works. Depending on the game mode, players either play from their own constructed decks or a shared communal deck. In either case, players form a 7-card hand size, and players simultaneously play 5 cards in a row from this hand face down. Then players take turns turning 1 card face up. Each card has a color and number, using Sonic characters as suits and rings as values, and if any player already has a face-up card matching both the color and number of the freshly turned-up one, they must discard it. If an opposing face-up card matches either the color or number and happens to be in the same row slot, then that card is also discarded. Some cards also have game text that trigger when flipped, or at the end of a hand if the card is still in play. After all cards have been turned face up, the player with the highest summed value remaining wins a Chaos Emerald, which is just a random face-down card from the top of the deck kept off to the side. At the end of a hand, remaining cards are slid down into a second row, while cards in the second row are discarded. Thus, the next hand begins with some cards already face up, and some knowledge to go on, and where players place their face-down cards for the next hand. The first player to win 3 Chaos Emeralds wins! I could see why Sonic X didn't become one of the surviving TCGs, despite having the advantage of an incredibly popular intellectual property. The Sonic theme is really weak, which is a cardinal sin for a game based on a popular IP. The mechanics, while interesting for a TCG, don't really make sense for a TCG at all. From my description of tactical color number-based play, if I hadn't already mentioned the theme and designer, one might have thought I was describing a small box Knizia game. Due to its shared deck, the game actually reminds me of another trading card game, the Pez CCG, which also didn't make any sense being a CCG for the same reasons that Sonic X doesn't make any sense as a TCG. Deck construction is not interesting at all or even needed with these sorts of mechanics. With that in mind, I can't help but think the game might have been more successful released as a standalone game instead. In any event, I don't see any need to chase down any of the expensive boosters. The game is fine just with a starter, and I can't see what additional cards would even add in this case. I'm also not surprised I was able to add this game to the games only I played Geek List last month. Dead CCG plays are often a contender for inclusion in that list, and Sonic X is more obscure than most. So for people who know what to expect and don't mind the Pasadena theme, it's an okay game suitable for an occasional play. Despite the Sonic presence, I don't think my son will be requesting this one much, though. And for those looking for a traditional trading card game experience, I wouldn't recommend this one at all. This episode, I continue my countdown of both BGGs and my own top 5 of 2010 with the number 3s on the list. Since there are a couple of crossovers on our list, I'm taking a look at the 5th highest ranked game on BGG from 2010 today, Rune Wars, the fantasy-themed area control classic from thematic master designer Corey Knetzka and publisher Fantasy Flight Games. I don't actually know a lot about this game as I've never played it. I wouldn't be adverse to trying it sometime, but it's not one that has ever come into my circle, remarkably. One of those odd quirks of gaming. My various groups play plenty of fantasy games and plenty of area control games, but those interests have never coincided with Rune Wars, specifically for some reason. I own Rune Age, which takes place in the same setting, which I've played once and found okay, and I own Rune Bound, which also takes place in the same setting, but which has sat languishing on my unplayed shelf for a couple of years now, as Fantasy Flight Games are off to do for me. So really not much else I can say about Rune Wars. My own personal number 3 game from 2010 is Seven Wonders, which is the other crossover on my list with BGG. Seven Wonders would actually be the number 1 game on BGG from 2010. It's held up over time for a reason for me. It's still one of the best drafting games, and revolving around that mechanic makes it one of the few games that plays briskly, tactically, strategically, and at a wide range of satisfying player counts. That's a remarkable achievement, and my respect for the design is still strong after 10 years. Seven Wonders is also noteworthy after all this time for possessing a bunch of expansions that are fun to play, and yet the base game is still fun without them, even knowing they exist. That's often a difficult and delicate line to walk for more recent games, but one that Seven Wonders managed to do effortlessly. If I were to rank the Seven Wonders expansions, none of which I hate, I would rank them from favorite to good like this: Leaders, Wonder Pack, Armada, Cities, and Babel. I'll also take a moment here and point out that a second edition was recently announced that modifies slightly some of the existing cards and wonders and adds a few new ones. That won't be something I'll be rushing out to get, since I have just about everything for Seven Wonders already, but I do hope there will be an update pack for first edition owners. Well, that will do it for episode 72. Thanks for listening. Feel free to join the Out of the Dust Podcast Guild at BoardGameGeek.com. Follow the podcast on Twitter at OutOfTheDustBGG. Leave a comment at the Guild. PM me on BGG under user handle Radagast14 or user handle Ann_Lee14, or email me at radagast14@CenturyLink.net. And join the Out of the Dust conversation yourself at our monthly geek list at BGG. Alright, play me out, Ananda!